A broad daylight shooting on the Upper East Side when a young mother is murdered in front of her 1-year-old daughter. The shooter, a former probation officer, and the victim's ex-mother-in-law.
It's a sick, twisted way to look at it because obviously that doesn't help your grandchild to lose their mother, no matter how bad the mother is. Every child needs two parents.
Reports now say the victim and her ex were in the midst of a tumultuous custody battle. But does he have anything to do with the murder?
Did dad lead his mom to a point where she had no choice but to harm the child's mother? Is dad guilty of some sort of conspiracy or felony murder?
Other reports say the shooter was terminally ill, which may have pushed her to pull the trigger.
His own mom was on her deathbed, apparently, very sick with cancer, had nothing to lose, and thought, I'm going to go in and help my son.
Then there's the past reports of violence between the victim and her ex-husband. Could that have been a warning sign?
Courts are very reluctant to go out and issue restraining orders against people who might become violent just because there's some flimsy evidence.
To understand the case as we know it right now, we sat down with Atlanta trial lawyer Randy Kessler, who specializes in family law.
So the family law background makes me look at, custody turns into murder, unfortunately, is a story we see way too often, right? What I would like to see and what I'm hoping to see in the future is what was the status of the custody case. It's not strange for me to see emotions like this in a custody case. We see them all the time. Somebody's mad, especially when it's not the actual litigant, right? It's not the father that killed the mother. It's the father's mother who murdered the mother. And she was, of course, hearing only dad's side of the story. And so that bothers me. The dad was, bad-mouthing mom to his own mom.
It was Friday, July 26th, when 45-year-old Marisa Galloway was shot. She was packing a stroller into the back of her Honda Civic, less than a block from Gracie Mansion, the New York City mayor's residence in Manhattan. Galloway's 1-year-old daughter was in the car. At about 9 o'clock in the morning, shots rang out. Galloway was shot in the head, and after falling to the ground, she was shot again in the back. Investigators quickly identified the suspect as 65-year-old Kathleen Leigh, who had a close relationship to Galloway.
She's a retired Cook County probation officer, and we believe that she's been living in New York City with family members for the past 3 years. She is the grandmother of Marisa Galloway's 4-year-old child.
Marisa Galloway was a special ed teacher in New York who had a passion for running. She had 2 daughters, a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. She shared custody of her older daughter with her ex. We're not listing his name because he hasn't been charged with a crime, but it was his mother who shot and killed Galloway. According to her neighbors, there was a history of this ex harassing Galloway, so much so that she even reported it.
This ongoing dispute has resulted in 5 domestic incident reports being taken by the NYPD, along with 2 complaint reports. Neither of these incidents, any of these incidents, resulted in an arrest.
But could these domestic disputes have foreshadowed Galloway's murder?
Boy, that's the question of the day. And I mean, I had a meeting with someone today, and I have meetings all the time with people who say, but I know he's going to hurt me. And unfortunately, the way the law works is until you can really prove it, until he's already done something, and then he's likely to do it again, courts are very reluctant to go out and issue restraining orders against people who might become violent just because there's some flimsy evidence. And, it's a hard balance. Courts try to err on the side of caution, but you also have the other side, which is now people make false claims just so they can get custody or get someone kicked out of their house. So courts don't have it easy. The public likes to complain about the courts and the family law system, but God help judges that have to make those decisions every day. It's a tough one. I wish in this case they'd issued a restraining order. But again, Sierra, a restraining order, like we learned in law school, it's just a piece of paper, right? Even if someone is restrained by a piece of paper from coming around their spouse or their other parent or their boyfriend or girlfriend, if you're really angry and you're really evil, you're not going to let a piece of paper stop you.
Investigators say the motive in the crime was a custody dispute, as Galloway and her ex shared custody of their 4-year-old daughter.
The preliminary motive for this incident is going to be an ongoing domestic dispute between Ms. Galloway, her 4-year-old child's son, and the shooter.
But Kessler says the arrangement was pretty fair.
It seemed like a pretty generous parenting schedule. It was 3-4, right? 3 days to dad, or 3, we do it by nights, right? 3 overnights to dad, 4 overnights to mom. It's not 50-50, but I know a heck of a lot of dads that would be very happy to have 3 days out of every 7 with their child. I know a lot of aggrieved parents, moms sometimes, dads sometimes, who only get 1 day a week or 2 days a week, or they have to be supervised when there's really no reason for it in their mind. There are a lot of objective factors that just don't exist here. I can't just look at this and say, based on the way the court ruled, no wonder dad's mad. There's got to be something more to it, and that's what I think the investigators are going to look for.
But according to reports, Kathleen Leigh felt the custody arrangement was unfair and even suggested that Galloway abused her 4-year-old daughter. This resulted in 2 investigations by New York's Child Protective Services, but they both came back clean in terms of Galloway. Kessler suggests that Kathleen Leigh was likely hearing negativity about Galloway from her son, and all this will be revisited in an investigation.
I think in a lot of ways they're going to look at the allegations of abuse. In the custody case, they're going to see, was dad at fault? And you may also have another conspirator kind of case. We had the cases previously, last year there was a big one, right, where somebody talked their boyfriend or girlfriend into killing themselves, and they actually were found guilty of that, even though they didn't pull the trigger. Did dad lead his mom to a point where she had no choice but to harm the child's mother? Is dad guilty of some sort of conspiracy or felony murder? I think this is new law, a new area that we haven't seen before. There's a lot of investigation yet to be done. A lot of people would say, case closed. We know who the murderer was. We caught her. There was a note. She killed herself. Case is over. No more public resources need to be spent. But I think they're going to spend some resources and dig a little bit to see, did dad push mom? Did he buy her the gun? That would be overt. Did he subtly just encourage her to hate the mother of the child? It's just an interesting, we want to discourage people from doing that because this is the result. This may be an exemplary case where we say we're going to prosecute this guy to make sure nobody else tries to convince a third party to harm the other parent.
But at what point does this bad-mouthing of Galloway jump from venting to conspiracy to commit murder?
Boy, there'd be a lot of people in jail if complaining about your ex-spouse was enough to put you in jail, right? So there's a degree. Is it, I'm just complaining, I'm venting, I'm telling my mom about how bad my ex-wife is? Or was it a actual thoughtful, deliberate act that I know that, number one, my mom's terminally ill. I know my mom has handguns. I know my mom is angry. I know my mom wouldn't have any problem doing anything in the world for me. And I'm going to provoke her and I'm going to push her to do, if it's that evil and that devious, then maybe it is criminal, right? If you have the intent to cause harm, that's the first requirement, that he's got to have some mens rea, some intent. And so they're going to probably dig a little bit deeper to see if it passes that threshold of just venting, complaining about your ex-spouse or the other parent of your child, which is common, very, very, very common, or is it criminal?
There's still a question mark when it comes to the future of the 4-year-old's custody.
I can't imagine that he knew she would do that. I can't imagine he hoped she would do that. I hope not. There's so many interesting legal angles to it now, because in family law, when a parent dies, the first person we turn to for custody is the remaining parent, right? The surviving parent is the court's first choice. And in this case, presumably the surviving parent is innocent. He is not the one who committed the murder. So does he get custody of the 4-year-old? Was he involved? There's going to be an investigation. So aside from the whodunit on the murder side, it's sort of fascinating to me on how does this affect custody of the 4-year-old? Does the court want to keep the 4-year-old and the 1-year-old together and place them with the father of the 1-year-old? But do they have to overcome the burden of taking a child away from their natural parent who might be totally innocent in all of this? So there's just a lot of moving parts on the custody angle to me.
NYPD investigators say Leigh had been living in a building on East 79th Street for the past 3 years. But ahead of that, she was a probation officer out of Cook County, Illinois. Investigators say they found the murder weapon and another weapon at the crime scene.
We have recovered 2 firearms at this location, one from the sidewalk near Mrs. Leigh and one from inside of a tote bag that Miss Leigh was carrying.
In the days following Galloway's murder, security camera images of the moments before the attack were released. In the photos, you can see Galloway outside of her Honda Civic with a stroller. We know that she was putting it into the trunk when she was shot. Another image shows Kathleen Leigh with the gun in her hand. She's using a Target plastic bag to cover it from view.
What we have on video, Miss Galloway puts the child in the back seat of the car. She is then in the process of putting the stroller in the trunk, where she is approached by Miss Leigh, who who shoots her in the head, and then when she's on the ground, shoots her in the back.
At the time of the murder, Kathleen Leigh was undergoing treatment for terminal cancer.
I mean, we all want to jump to the easiest conclusion, which is, I know I'm leaving this world anyway. If I can do anything good before I leave this world, I'm going to get rid of the impediment to my son's relationship with his child. You know, you hate to think that. There's no proof of that, nothing that I've read, but that's, you know, when you don't have anything else to point to, that's one answer, right? That's the only answer that we all have. I'm not going to be here much longer, and I want to make sure my son has a relationship. It's a sick, twisted way to look at it, because obviously that doesn't help your grandchild to lose their mother, no matter how bad the mother is. Every child needs two parents.
After shooting Galloway twice, Leigh turned the gun on herself. She was pronounced dead on the scene. Investigators found a lengthy note in her pocket titled "For Police." According to reports, she outlined abuse allegations, all at the hands of Galloway. The contents of the note have not been released publicly, but Kessler says they could be.
Well, if it's evidence in a trial, it will be released. And under the Freedom of Information Act, I think eventually it will come out. But it is interesting. I mean, does it indicate that her son had anything to do with it? That's what I'm really interested in. Not, you know, hey, I did this and I'm sorry and I apologize and I repent or whatever it is. But why did she do it? Did she say, based on what my son told me? Or if she says, based on my belief that she's done these things, and if it's something she could only have learned from her son, then is he culpable? Did he just, again, complain or vent to his mom about things his child's mother did? Or did he do it so manipulatively that he was making up, concocting lies to try to motivate her, especially if he knew she was predisposed to violence, to carrying this out? You know, if anybody ever heard her say, son, you tell me what I need to do, I'll take care of that woman for you, you know, then he's in trouble.
Moving forward, Kessler anticipates multiple investigations in this case.
There'll be two investigations, right? One is on the criminal side, are they going to prosecute him? One's on the family court side, what's best for the child? And we all hear that the courts like to do what's best for the child, but that's not really the standard. Between two parents, the courts figure out what's best for the child. But between a parent and a third party, maybe a parent and the deceased mother's sibling or the deceased mother's parent, you know, between a parent and a third party, it's not what's just in the best interest of the child. You have to show, in most states, by clear and convincing evidence or some higher standard, that removing the child from a parent is absolutely in the child's best interest. And that's harder than just tipping the scales. It's not just anybody can step in and say, I'd do a better job. Grandparents might do a better job. In fact, you know, my mom might have done a better job raising my daughter than I did because she was older and wiser and was retired, but that's not the standard. So first thing is to figure out, does dad have any real blemishes? Not just that he's more disciplinarian or he yells or he's angry, but is he involved somehow in this murder, this conspiracy to murder, which would then put the child's life at risk and at danger, and maybe be grounds for the court to say, Dad, you're not getting custody. You might not even get parenting time, or you might not get unsupervised parenting time. So that's a whole separate investigation from, did he have any criminal involvement in the murder? My prediction is they're not going to just carte blanche give custody to dad. I think the family court's going to jump in and they're going to say, let's put a hold on everything. Let's make sure the child is safe. Both children. The 1-year-old is probably going to go with, you know, his or her father. The 4-year-old may just join that 1-year-old because they've been living together. They're siblings. That's the safest, seems like the easiest place. But again, I don't know enough about it. I don't think they're going to turn around and say, Dad, you get to step in. Dad's going to be kicking and screaming, hey, my child needs me. My child's mother is gone, and my child is with me 3 days out of every 7. I think there might be an immediate hold on that if there's any fear of risk to the child. I think what's going to happen, though, is dad's going to have access to the child, but there'll be some monitors, some protections, whether it's supervision or whatever. And dad should welcome that. Dad should say, supervise, because you know what a supervisor is? They're a witness that I'm a good dad. Have all the people you want watch me with my child, because my child probably needs more people around him or her. But they're going to do something. I just don't think it's going to go to dad gets full custody without any oversight whatsoever. This child's going to need help in any way, whether it's psychological, mental, physical. Can't imagine what this child's life is going to be like growing up, learning what happened when he or she's old enough to learn.
Kessler says this isn't the first time he's seen a custody dispute with a similar outcome.
Unfortunately, it is. We were involved in a very high-profile case where there was the mother's boyfriend hired a hitman to kill the father, and that was well publicized. And there have been other ones like that have not been so well publicized. And unfortunately, it happens over and over. And you know, the sick joke that people always make is, well, I don't need to hire you, Mr. Kessler. I could just hire a criminal defense lawyer to defend me when I go murder him or murder her. And they laugh and they joke. And I have to have a serious conversation saying, you can't joke about that. You can't think about it for a lot of reasons. Number one, it's a bad thing. But number two, God forbid something does happen to her. And now I heard you say that you were going to do that. Now, do I have an obligation to go to the, you know, the feelings are real. The emotion's real. Acting on it is rare, but there's so much divorce and so many custody disputes that if there are 100,000 custody disputes in the country, one or two of these is a low percentage, but it's one or two too many. But the short answer is yes, we see these issues, we see these frustrations, we see these claims, and we see these acts happen, you know, not too much, but any amount is too much.
In the end, Kessler says that while custody agreements can be tense, there are ways to keep the peace.
You know, sunlight's the best disinfectant, and a lesson as simple as don't complain about the other parent. You never know what somebody listening could do. There are crazy people in the world. Usually it's not your own mother. But if you spend your whole time griping and complaining about the negatives of the other side, it doesn't help. Even if it's just that it trickles down and people start thinking poorly of her and treating her poorly, or the child hears the way you're talking about it. You know, parents have to build up each other. Even if they don't like each other, a child is half mom and half dad. And when you criticize mom, you're criticizing half the child. And when you criticize dad, you're criticizing half the child. And parents need to always remember that. And I think that's going to be better for the child. That's the only takeaway that I can think that the average person can get from this.
The investigation into Marisa Galloway's death is still underway. Right now, her 4-year-old daughter is in custody of her father, Kathleen Leigh's son. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Gillespie.